is in. Yeah, thank you, Shunga. We are recording this session as well. So if you're not comfortable with that, you can log off now and then watch the recording afterwards. Otherwise, please stay here. So we will try to inspire you with this session, increase your awareness on cybersecurity, and of course, as I said, answer all your questions if possible. So with no further ado, please let me introduce Chung-Wai Lee from Cisco, your cybersecurity specialist, and Håkan Nore, technical solution architect. Please take it away.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here today, and I hope you will enjoy this webinar, since we will talk about the 5 ways to defend against data breach in 2022. So shall we start, Håkan?
Yeah, we are prepared.
Yeah, let's take a look at the agenda. So we will go through the following. We'll start with talking about the risk that you can't ignore. And after that, we will go, and I think in order to build a good defense, you have to know your enemy. And after that, we will continue with lay out the defense strategy for you to take with you for 2022. And we will end this call with a short Q&A session. Please write your questions in the Q&A box, as Andreas mentioned, and stay interactive, because I think it will be better for both of us. So let's start. And I just want to start with this slide. This is John Chambers. He's the former CEO of Cisco, and I think this quote that he did many years ago still are very valid. He talks about there are 2 types of companies: those who have been hacked and those who don't yet know if they have been hacked. And this is something you should think about. Who are you of these 2 companies? Because I think a data breach today, it's actually inevitable. So you have to really take security seriously. So let's talk about a little bit about security risk. You can't ignore. And you know what? Security risk is actually business risks.
Indeed.
Any comments about that?
No, that's absolutely true. So let's now focus on the business impact of some quite famous security incidents.
Exactly, because this is something that everybody understands when you talk about business risk. And if you don't work with security, this will be impacting on your whole business. And let's look at the first quote: all distribution of gas stopped in Eastern US.
Yes, and this was an attack last May against an oil company called Colonial Pipeline, who was responsible for the distribution of gas, petrol and such, to all the Eastern US. And there was a ransomware attack that affected their OT, operations technology systems, handling things such as gas vaults, gorges, etc., that caused them to actually stop the distribution of all the gas in the Eastern US for several days. And you can imagine this hit the headlines in the United States, because if you can't fill up your car there with gas, well, life has no meaning, right?
Yeah. And usually when the recommendation, if you get a ransomware, is do you pay the ransom or not?
No, you don't.
Yeah.
But
what did they do?
Colonial Pipeline actually did pay, and they came up honestly admitting that they had paid the ransomware to get the systems back and running.
Because it's indeed a critical infrastructure, and people can live without electricity and or gas. So, but they did get some of the money back via the FBI. Let's take another example, Håkan.
Well, this has happened many times, but quite recently in a northern Swedish local government called Kalix. They were hit by ransomware a couple of weeks ago only. And one impact of this was that they could not pay salaries, etc., or they had to go back to workarounds to that, like paying the November salary twice or something like that in December. But another impact was that they could not access the medical journals, so they did not know exactly what type of medicines, etc., to send out to what elderly patients that they had in care. So it was really, really serious. But they still handled it quite well, and they have, I think, what we have learned from this local government will benefit, I think, many other local governments in Sweden.
Yeah, and another famous attack that happened during the WannaCry attack in 2017, that WannaCry hit a couple of hospitals, where one was in the UK, that they actually have to close down the whole emergency unit. And this is extremely vulnerable because I mean, it's the most critical thing that can happen, or the impact is actually when people can die from an attack. So next, how about this? Have to close all shops because of a problem at a supplier to a supplier. And this is to all the Swedish customers who's joined us today. You probably know this very well, that but this was also written globally on the media, that one of the supermarket chain, Coop in Sweden, they were not actually hacked.
No, there was like one of their suppliers called Visma. They had one of the technical systems in their environment that was hacked. So this was a double supply chain attack, but it still caused this retail chain to close down all the shops, almost. One or two made it because they were not on the same system, but all the shops in all Sweden for several days.
And the funny thing is, I mean, today, this is 2021, like last year. And if we look back almost 10 years ago, 2003, we had another attack on a power plant. And it was a worm attack for Microsoft Systems. And this was also the agency, the consultant agency that worked for the energy company that owns a power plant. They actually get infected by the consultant agency, and through them get connected and infected the whole power plant. Fortunately, this power plant was closed down because it was known that it was called David Bassi, and it was known one of the power plants that had very bad security. So it was shut down because they had to do some fixes. Fortunately, it didn't end up in catastrophe, because if someone would take over the power plant, you can just imagine it can be a second Chernobyl. Now, how about this?
Yeah, and we talk a lot about ransomware and ransomware attacks. And I think the big thing with ransomware is that they are very visible. You do notice that when you get attacked, because they want you to get to notice and they want you to pay. There are also several other hacking attacks taking place all the time, where they are much more stealthy. They want to hide in your environment and subtly do things such as changing your bank accounts or maybe creating fake invoices. So there was a famous case in Sweden a couple of years ago where one guy, or a league of few people, one head actor, who actually gained like tens of millions of euros by essentially taking over financial systems and others in hundreds of different Swedish customers. And this still goes on. Only like a couple of weeks ago, there was in the Swedish newspapers about a law firm who was the bankruptcy estate owner of an organization gone to bankruptcy, and they also paid millions of Swedish crowns, or tens of millions of Swedish crowns, which means millions of euros, in fake invoices. And this is still going to court, I think, because they can't agree who should pay.
And the funny thing is, I mean, these attacks is not really sophisticated attack. They usually use a simple phishing email to lure people like those who in accounting, or sometimes CEO, just to get their credentials and then fake in their name to do orders in that company's name with that specific person's name. So this happens basically all the time.
And now we mentioned the business impact. And now let's get a little bit more technical maybe on attack and defense.
Yeah, so like you see, I mean, all of these attacks that we exemplified here, when we talk about business impact and business risk, what they lose is really a lot of money usually, But even worse for many companies is they might be losing their reputation and brand. And some companies, especially the newer ones, may never recover and have to shut down. Those who might survive are usually those companies that have been with us for a while. Their brand, and data breach happens today. So it depends on how they kind of do the disaster recovery and how they communicate out to society that kind of decide of how they will manage through. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about how to think like a hacker, because I'm like I said, in order to build a good defense strategy, but also defense measures, you have to understand how they work. And this is like my fellow Chinese, Sun Qu. He's a military strategist when it comes to warfare. So this is what he said: know the selves to know the enemy.
And lots of security presentations show quotes from this guy. And since you're the first one who can probably pronounce his name, maybe you should say it once more.
Sun Qu.
Okay.
But I speak Cantonese usually, and this is like maybe Mandarin, so not sure if I pronounced the Mandarin correctly. Anyway, but let's talk a little bit about the adversaries out there. Håkan, would you like to name a few here? I have a couple of examples.
Yeah, you can go ahead and mention those you know.
Okay, so up in the left corner where you see the skeleton, this is a network called the Guardians of Peace, also known as GOP. This is a group that was responsible for hacking Sony Pictures 2014, where they also planted a ransomware and basically took out the whole company and stole a lot of credential and customer information that they distributed and sold to other third parties. Another adversary that is worth mentioning is, it's kind of spelled a little bit backward, but it is the Russian Business Network. This is a private, you can say this is a cyber criminal mafia. So what they do is they sell malware. They can also sell cyber criminals as a service. So this is a group that have a main purpose of earning a lot of money, whilst many of the others are like the GOP are connected to a nation's intelligence, so kind of owned by the nation, where they state a lot of nation-state attacks. Yeah. But like I said, these are coming up all the time, and today data breach is really inevitable because the purpose can be either to kind of earn money, and the other is for espionage. Okay, so why don't we go and look at how attacker actually work and the process, which we call the cyber attack kill chain.
Okay, and the following slides are from a presentation I've been giving at different cybersecurity conferences such as DEF CON, Texas Cybersecurity Summit, Grey Hat, and others. And the cyber attack kill chain, I like it because it really helps you understand the structure of the attack without going into the details of exactly what exploits or vulnerabilities used. And so this cyber attack kill chain, you may have seen it in many different shapes and formats, but I've simplified it a little bit in order to focus on the key events that will take place in any attack. So if you start then with recon, the objective with recon here from the attacker's perspective is to learn about your organization, your business, your partners maybe, your employees in particular. Who are the users there, and who is managing whom, and many other things, and what are their interests. And the main source of recon today is public sources. You Google the target, or you use Facebook and LinkedIn to find out information about the target. Or we can find information at other forums, such as tech forums. And indeed, you can still use the old-fashioned method of finding out about IP addresses from RIPE or similar. So an example here from what you can find out from LinkedIn and Facebook. And this is a fake account that we are using for an ethical hacking training I'm doing. The account here to the left is of a guy called Mordia Cat, who is an IT admin. And here you can, for example, see from LinkedIn to the left that he is probably interested in a new job position. He may have updated his CV recently here or added more stuff. And then to the right, you can see from his public Facebook site what are his main interests in life. And in this case, this is a gourmet person who is very passionate about tuna fish. Okay, let's see how we can use this in order to take control of the system of the organization.
Just to mention, because we are talking about social engineering here, if I were a hacker and I want to get access to, in this case, Mordia Cat, I would try to lure him and manipulate him to do the hard work for me, and try to get his credential, and by that I can, instead of hacking into a company, I can just log in. So this is what the whole meaning with social engineering means.
So the next step in the attack chain is that we want to take control of one system. It's typically enough to take control of one system, which means that they only need to lure one single user to click on something. And let's see how this could be done. Well, we use the information we got from Facebook and LinkedIn, and we create a nice email with some executable malware. Office documents with macros is still extremely efficient and one of the dominating attack vectors. And in this case, we have a nice email. We have even called the victim before, asking him that we are going to send him a job offer with calculations of his payment in Excel, and he may need to click on allowing macros in order to calculate his projected earnings. And if we write this email in a good way, or if we create a link to a website which looks really, really authentic, there is no way that the user will not click on this. And once he clicks on this, we will have taken over his computer, and we can do anything that the user himself can do on that computer. So the next step, which is important to understand in the attack kill chain, is the command and control. How the attacker can control the system remotely. Okay, so go ahead, one slide. So this may look a little bit technical, but what I'm trying to explain here is that the command and control that the attacker is using to control the system on the inside is using protocols that you are allowed through your firewall today. So this will go through your next generation firewall or proxy with all likelihood, because it will look exactly legitimate. There will be no like stuff sticking out in this traffic. It will look like a normal traffic between, say, an Internet Explorer or an Edge browser or a Firefox browser and some sort of server on the internet. So it's difficult to detect this type of traffic, or even impossible, by traditional means such as deep packet analysis or IPS or traditional next generation firewall techniques. So the next step in the attack kill chain, which is important to know about, it is lateral movement. How we can now spread internally. Go ahead. So now that we control one system through this outgoing HTTP or HTTPS session, the attacker can access everything that the internal client can reach. So the attacker, if it's a ransomware attack, it does not have to be content with just encrypting the data on this particular machine or its connected drives. It can also jump to other systems. After stealing credentials, can jump and take control of other systems. So animation, please. And this can then involve infrastructure such as Active Directory, networking infrastructure. It can also be IoT systems, or in the case with Colonial Pipeline, it could even be very serious OT systems.
When it comes to Colonial Pipeline, I think I read something that they were in their environment for several months before they actually get detected. Because I guess once they have taken control of one computer, they start the lateral movement to take over, and the other one under the radar.
Yeah, we should not assume that ransomware attacks just happen within like 5 minutes. They could also persist in your environment for a longer time to seek out the targets. So the last thing in the attack kill chain, it's really to act on the objectives, which is the formal term. I say do bad stuff. So the things you could do now when you control one or more systems on the inside is to encrypt data. You could ask for ransomware, of course, to gain money that way. You could instead also do traditional espionage. You could steal data that you can later sell. Maybe sell it back to the owner, or threaten them to sell to, for example, their competitors, or to publish the data, which means that they have to pay the ransomware twice. Once for the de-encryption, and once for not having the attacker selling the data. We also have sabotage, basically just ruining all the data for the fun of it. And we have old school fraud. From the hacking attacks I mentioned a little bit earlier, from a Swedish hacking attack, the things that guy did after persisting a long time in the organizations was to change bank account numbers, create fake invoices. He had hacked one one customer that used to order iPads for schools. So he ordered 200 iPads to be delivered to a specific address in Stockholm where he could receive them. He also, for another company's behalf, he ordered an excavator machine. I thought it was called a digging machine, so I had to Google the English term here. And that is one of those things you see to the bottom right, which probably cost a few €100,000. And for some reason, he ordered one of those as well.
Okay, so now when we have gone through the attack kill chain, let's look at some defense solution to kind of map it into each of the steps. And funny thing is, this is I love Dilbert, and this is something that is actually happening today as well for many companies. That when they are not prepared, or they have very bad security measures, and the only disaster recovery plan, it's not funny really, but it is actually like this.
Let's see if we can do better. Well, in terms of preventing the initial foothold, I think it is very important with a soft thing here, and that is user training and user awareness training. At Cisco, for example, we are regularly receiving emails from somebody who's trying to hack us. So we get emails where we are trying to lure us into clicking on a link or opening an attachment. And when we do that, we are getting to a web page of Cisco's IT where we are being scolded for being so easy to fool, part of user awareness training. But let's also not forget email security. Email remains the key attack vector. Like, I think close to 90% of all the attacks starts with an email. And its email security is super important. And what we see is that many of our customers out there still don't have a proper email defense, and definitely not an optimized email defense, with lots of weaknesses in terms of handling incoming email where attacks can too easily get through, but also weaknesses in terms of protecting their own brand and their own reputation, preventing that other people can pretend to be them, sending fake emails on their behalf. So email security is definitely something that people should look at to improve.
Do you see, Håkan, that many organizations that have some sort of email security, that they see email security equals spam filter?
Yes, definitely. And they often go with like included email security. They think that because email is such an old protocol and old technology, they think it may not be sexy enough to invest in. But be very aware that the attackers and the intruders, they do think email is the sexiest communication media as there is.
Yeah, and if you want to know more about email security, you should definitely Google on business email compromise, because there are a lot of information about how a lot of companies get attacked plain by email, simple email spoofing.
Let's move on to the next thing here, which is DNS security. And DNS security is really just looking at a DNS request, like what domain names are the systems on the inside or our clients trying to communicate with. And this is so efficient because all normal surf traffic now, all web traffic on the internet is being encrypted. And it's very difficult to understand what's happening by looking into the data which is encrypted. But the DNS requests, we can still read. We have to be able to read them in order to route the DNS properly, in order to resolve it properly. And here it is super interesting to see what are the DNS requests from our clients. Or we, for example, have clients who are asking for domains that have previously never been seen on the internet, a big spike of traffic suddenly to this domain. It could very well be a domain which is used for a ransomware attack. Or maybe a domain which has a very strange distribution, like the servers are hosted in Ukraine or Russia, and the clients are in Western Europe. Or other weird relationships within the domain names, such as certain domain names that are mainly being requested by clients that we also know are going to known bad stuff. So there are lots of analytics that we can apply to DNS requests, and that analytics can be implemented in the cloud in a way which is super simple to implement to our customers now. And last but not least, we have here endpoint security. Endpoint security is becoming more and more important. So wherever you can, please make sure you have a super good endpoint security system across all the operating systems you have there. Remember, there are other systems than Windows as well.
So in this step, basically, all the solution is what we can do here is kind of stopping the next step of connected to the command and control server.
Exactly. We're trying to stop them from gaining foothold. Okay. Here, when it comes to command and control, a very good way here is to apply a zero trust policy, which means we should restrict access to the internet to only systems that really need to communicate with the internet, and to only the sites where we really need to communicate. In many organizations, that is a bit brutal, not to have free surfing to the internet. And in those cases, we need to apply network analytics and really trying to understand the patterns of the traffic going from our internal network or from our clients to the internet. And I will mention that a little bit more detail shortly. Next slide. And the same thing goes here for lateral movement. So command and control, we are really looking at the traffic which is leaving our clients or systems out to the internet. With lateral movement, we need to look at the traffic internal to our network. And again, we can use zero trust here. In the old days, we used to call that segmentation. We should not let anything on the inside have access to everything on the inside. We should enforce segmentation on the inside, and we should enforce multi-factor authentication on the inside. So an attacker cannot just jump from one system to another with stolen credentials. And again, here we can use something which I like to call network analytics, which I will describe shortly.
Yeah, let's give them an example.
Yeah, what is really network analytics and how can it help? And I always like to take this example, which is a true example from a friend of mine. He's Italian, it's called David or David. And I try to hide his identity here in this picture so you cannot easily recognize him. He has a teenage daughter, which he cares a lot about, who's called Alice. And sometimes he wants to keep track of Alice. And how does he do that? Well, he uses analytics. He analyzes her phone bill. He does not have to actually eavesdrop on the actual conversations. All he needs to do is to look at the phone bill about the traffic patterns. So here, for example, we have Alice starts receiving and placing calls to somebody called B. These calls are very frequent and they happen at different times, even late at night or in the morning. And the calls last a very long time, between 30 and 90 minutes. So the next morning, after performing the analysis, David then tells his daughter at the breakfast table, I think you have a new boyfriend. Could you tell me more about him? What does he do? What does he work with? Blah, 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 you know. And Alice is, of course, very surprised that her father knows about this. And then after a while, then the traffic pattern changes. Alice stops calling B, but B calls Alice very often during 3 days, and these calls are very short. Again, he has not listened to any conversation, he's just studying the phone bill. And he can then understand that probably what has happened is that his daughter Alice has ditched the boyfriend, and he is now stalking her, and she's just hanging up. So an example of how efficient it can be here with network analytics to understand that something has gone really, really wrong without having to do the deep packet inspection, without having to listen in to the calls.
So what we have just described here is for each of the kill chain of the step. I mean, we try to stop as much as possible, but we can never stop 100%. So every time it will come down to, it just needs to have 0.01% to have leaked in a data breach. And when it is in our network, we just need to try to prevent it from spreading. So this is why we use analytics to kind of stop the lateral movement. Okay, so let's take the last bullet where we talked about the defense strategies that you need to think of for 2022. One of the most important thing when it comes to defining your or know what your vulnerabilities are or what your asset, and also what is it that you really care about in your company that can't not go down, is you have to define your asset. You have to know what it is you need to protect, because you cannot protect everything because it will be too expensive. So you need to do an inventory of your assets in your company, and then also understand what your assets are worth. If your production line, if your production company goes down, how long can you last before it's kind of becoming critical for your what do you say, so you can actually survive, but also when you understand what it's worth and you know your asset, you have to start to prioritize, because like I said, you only have maybe a limited of budget for this year. Then you have to really, get the bang for the bucks and prioritize a solution or processes that is worth protecting the most important thing. So you need to also have money for a so-called innovation budget.
And one important thing here with this slide is that this is not an IT recommendation. This is a recommendation for the senior leadership of the organization.
Yeah. And we are seeing more organizations start to have room for innovation budget, because this is usually not something that they have allocated money for in a yearly budget. But it's so important if you want to be agile and be up to date with the modern threats we have today. And the second recommendation we have in the strategy, please practice. And the practice can be in the terms of try to hack yourself.
Yeah, or buy somebody who hacks you. Yeah. An ethical hacker.
Ethical hacker. Blue and red team. This is something you can hear sometimes. And what is your capability when it comes to incident response? Do you have backup processes? Have you practiced how it works with your backup processes on a regular basis? How is your detection capability? And do you have a communication plan when the incident happened? And how is that working? And also, of course, disaster recovery. All of this needs to maybe do a big practice, I think big organization, once or twice a year.
Yeah.
So you can keep up to date and also be proactive. Super important. And if we talk a little bit more on the technical part, because the first two slides are more on the softer things, you need to have some sort of first level of defense. The map you can see in the background is the countries where you see a lot of business email compromised threat actors. So if you look at Sweden, it's extremely red. We have lots of those. So this is happening everywhere. Make sure you really pay attention to secure your email. Have a really good email security solution, because this is still, the simplest way to get in, but also also the biggest attack vectors. And train management and users, because if you can get management to set the standard for caring about security, it is very hard to get the users or your employees to kind of have the same mindset. And once you have a first level of defense, to kind of taking all the buzz away, start to look at, having also a deeper defense. Look at, on a regular basis, where are we now in our technology stack? Do we have very old stuff, or should we maybe aim for a more modern technology? This is where the innovation budget comes in very handy. Look at how you can utilize data that you get from your security system in terms of data insights. Make sure that the security technology that you buy in have a really good security intelligence, because even though you have a really nice technology with a lot of nice features, if you have a lousy security intelligence, it doesn't make your solution effective. And make sure that you don't just have a great technology that you install and forget. Make sure that you also utilize the data for insight and have someone to help you to analyze the data to detect anomalies. This is how you go from reactive to a proactive mode.
And the deeper defense should also try to detect what's happening further down in the attack kill chain, not just the initial gaining foothold.
Exactly. And also look into how you can start to work in the zero trust approach, because this is today all the company is seldom just having all their assets on-prem. They usually have a hybrid environment where they do use cloud application. So basically we should treat your network as a huge internet. And the last one, partnership. A lot of organizations, maybe like yours, it's really hard today to get hold of people with security competence. And if you don't have that, and like I said, security risk or business risk, you really need to find good partners to work with to help you on that particular domain, because it's not worth risking, your company's brand and reputation and money, because you kind of ignore the business risk we just presented to you. So partnership is really super important. So with that, this is what we have today. I hope you get some good experience, inspiration maybe. And do we have any questions from the audience?
Yes, I have a few questions here, so I'll just get started right away since we have limited time. But one question is, and I think a lot of us can relate to this one, but if I only have limited time and budget, what should my top priorities be? Let's say I can only focus on 1 to 2 things.
Okay, we mentioned it here. First level of defense. Okay. So there is 2 things. One technological, and I think one is a soft one. You need to know your asset. What is it that you really need to protect? What is the most valuable things that cannot go down? Know that, and then make sure you have a good first level of defense, like DNS security, which is really efficient. And also email. If you start with those 2, you can have a pretty good hygiene, I would say, and you can start to have some good insight as well to kind of give you a notion of what we should invest in the next step. Yes, next one.
Great. Next question is it normally or only CXOs and upper level management who are targeted by social engineering? It could be anyone in the organization.
I could absolutely be anyone. And if I, as an ethical hacker myself, should choose anyone, I would probably pick maybe the PA of the CEO would be really good because he or she may know more about the organization and so on. But the number one prime target would be actually somebody working at the IT department. Say, for example, you hack into a guy's computer and he is the IT admin, he has Active Directory credentials, etc., which are very valuable. I own the whole organization. So those would actually be the favorite target. But you can first go for a less privileged user, and then from his computer, you can jump onto somebody else's computer. That's how it normally works.
Great questions.
Yeah.
Great. Okay, one related to, I suppose, Microsoft as well, but on Microsoft Defender, I guess that's widespread by now that many people are using it, but is it still necessary to have separate email protection, for example, even though I use some of the other standard Microsoft features?
I would definitely recommend complementing the Microsoft Defense with a best-of-breed email security solution, such as the one from Cisco. We can do many more things than what you can just do on the with the Microsoft Defender.
And one thing what I like to, I don't like to buy. How do you say this in English? Grisen i säcken. If I were a buyer, I would love to, see what the solution can complement on my current ones. So I like to try things before I actually go through with the order. So this is something I recommend. And in your case, with maybe complementing the Microsoft email, you should definitely try, other email security solution that you can put in front of the Microsoft Office and see how much you can actually take before it hits the Office email.
Yeah, we have lots of questions actually. If we have a firewall to prevent hacking, how likely is it we will be hacked if we don't open email which is blocked by firewall? Can a mail not caught by firewall open up to our financial system? And the answer is absolutely. And this is always how you need to think, unfortunately. Whatever system you have, and I'm not talking specific vendors here, but whatever system you have, there may be ways an attacker can get through it. So look at the firewalls like trying to stay away from the ankle biters, but not something that would protect you from the serious attackers.
Or imagine today when we have a lot of people working from home, and they don't even go directly to corporate network, but they are accessing directly out to internet. And if you hack them, then it's all again game over, because they are already hacked and they can use that target to kind of do lateral movement inside the corporate network without passing the firewall.
I mean, it's interesting because many people think about the firewall as like the panacea, the solution for all security problems. But nowadays, very often, people are not behind the firewall because they are working from home. And lots of the assets are actually not on corporate premises either. It's actually in the cloud. So the world is changing. And I think our budgets for investment in security have to adapt to these changes.
So do we have one more question if we have? Because the time is running out and it's great questions.
I don't see any more actually.
Okay.
Yeah, there are more questions, but I think we need to continue the discussions locally, hopefully. So thanks a lot for all your questions. Thank you, Sjunge. Thank you, Håkan. On the screen here, you can see your local representatives. Please reach out to Karsten in Denmark, Rune in Norway, or Steven here in Sweden. We are ready to support you with our specialist teams together with Cisco to continue the discussions. On top of that, we will of course also reach out to you in the near future to see what you thought and also hopefully, as I said, continue the discussions locally with you. So thank you very much for joining. Thank you, Sjunge. Thank you, Håkan. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much. And I wish you a pleasant day.
Thank you.
Have a great day. Thank you.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye-bye.